Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we'll review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study, Masechet Yevamot, pages 48 through 54, Memchet through Nun Daled. 48. Tana Rabbanan. Uvachta et avia v'tima yarach yamim. So regarding the Eshet Yefat Torah, the captive beauty, it says in the Torah that she cries for her mother and father for a month of days. The question is, what is the meaning of that crying? Et avia ve'tima, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, aviha mamish, ima mamish. That literally it means her mother and her father. She's crying over either the fact that she'll never see them again because she's been taken from her society, or maybe that they died in battle, and she'll never see them again because they're not alive anymore. But literally her parents. She's crying over the fate of her parents. Rabbi Akiva Omer, avia v'ima zovodat kol chavim. Akiva says, no, it means she's crying over her religious metamorphosis that's about to happen to her. She will lose her paganism. Her mother and father is a metaphor for her former religious beliefs. V'chein hu omer, and there's a quotation from the pasuk in Yirmiyahu chapter 2, Omrim la'etz aviyata, that the pagans would say to a piece of wood, you are my father. That they ascribed some sort of parental status to their false gods. Memtet 49. Ishto shemeta mutar ba'achota. If one's wife passed away, then the man is allowed to marry her sister, the deceased wife's sister. Gersha, if he divorces his wife, umeta, and then she died, mutar ba'achota, then he can marry her sister. Niset le'acher, she was divorced and then married somebody else, umeta, and then she died, mutar ba'achota, he can marry her sister. The common thread here is it doesn't matter how the relationship was severed between man and his wife. He can only marry her sister after she is no longer among the living. Now, if the relationship was severed by her dying, well, that's very straightforward. However, if it was severed by a divorce, then the divorce alone is insufficient. He must wait until she's no longer alive. But at that point, it is totally permissible, according to Torah law, for him to marry the deceased wife's sister. This was actually a controversy between Jews and Christians because the church would say that even after the death of his wife, he cannot marry her sister. And the rabbis protested vigorously against this, and eventually in Western societies, the law was changed to reflect the rabbinic point of view, the Jewish point of view. Daf Nun, page 50. Rabban Gamliel Omer, Ein get achar get. There is no such thing as a divorce after a divorce. V'lo ma'amar achar ma'amar. And neither a ma'amar, which is a rabbinical type of kiddushin for a yavama, there cannot be a ma'amar after a ma'amar. V'lo bi'ila achar bi'ila, nor relations after relations. V'lo chalitza achar chalitza, nor a chalitza ceremony after a chalitza ceremony. So we're talking about here is where there was a dead man, and his brother, the Yavam, now has a responsibility to perform some kind of a ceremony, whether Chalitza or Yibum, with one of the widows of his dead brother. But there were multiple widows. Let's say there were two. And he did the same ceremony with both women back to back. Rabbi Gamliel is saying there's no halachic validity to the second one, whether it was a get that was given, or a mamar which was performed, or a yibum through relations that was performed, or a chalitza, that the second one of that variety has no standing. However, the sages say, not true. Yesh get achar get. There is a divorce after a divorce, in the sense that the second get does have significance to forbid the man from contracting a marriage with the relatives of the second divorcee. Yesh mamar achar mamar, and there's power in the performance of a mamar back to back. However, if the first thing that was done was an act of yibum through sexual relations, or a chalitza, then if it were to be done again with the other woman, the second one would have no standing. Nun Aleph. Aser mamar bazu, or mamar bazu. What happens if mamar was done with both women? Rabban Gamliel Omer, noten get larishona. Well, a divorce must be given to the first woman, and then she must be released by way of chalitza. No marriage, no yibum, only chalitza. And he cannot marry her relatives. And he can marry the relatives of the second woman. Why? Because what was done with her was of no legal standing. So Gemara asks, Mikadi Rabbi Gamliel Omar ein mamar chamamar, if it's really the case that Rabbi Gamliel is of the opinion that there's no mamar after a mamar, then it should be permissible for the man to marry in Yibum the first woman. Why is it required that he give her chalitza? We should go ahead with a full-fledged marriage by Yibum. The Gemara answers, Gezerah dilma atili bim leshniya. Well, we're afraid a confusion will reign, and the man will end up getting married in Yibum to the second woman, which would be totally forbidden. So as to prevent that kind of foul-up, then Yibum is even forbidden in the first case, the first woman, a chalitza must be done. Nun bet. Rav Mangid, Rav would give corporal punishment, would smack anyone who betrothed a woman by way of intimacy. Or for that matter, who betrothed a woman in the marketplace, as opposed to with a more solemn ceremony out of the public view. Or for that matter, he would smack someone who got engaged, betrothed, without a prior arrangement, shiduchim, about the financial arrangements of the marriage. He would also smack someone who would nullify a get. This is a get that was being sent by way of a messenger, by an emissary, a shaliach, and the husband, while the messenger is en route, before the get has been executed, announces, well, the get is invalid. The problem with that is the messenger doesn't know and delivers it to the woman, and the woman might remarry thinking she's fully divorced. So this is a real crisis that we could have on our hands. And so the policy that Rav had was he would smack someone around who would do such a thing to cause everyone trouble. And he would also smack someone who would announce, after a court has ruled that he must give a get, this husband says, well, the get is being given under duress. Because it's given under duress, it's halachically invalid. And so Rav doesn't want a situation where it's being written, but it's being written and it's not kosher. And lastly, Rav would smack someone who was insolent, who behaved insolently towards messengers of the court. Nun Gimel. There's a machlokes among the Tanoim as to whether or not it is possible to effect a tanai, a condition, a stipulation regarding a chalitza ceremony, where the chalitza ceremony is done first and the condition must be put into effect second. Can that be kosher? And such that if it's the stipulation is adhered to, the chalitza is valid, and if the stipulation is not adhered to, then in hindsight the chalitza is not valid. So one approach is to say such a stipulation is lawful. The other is to say it's not lawful. The classic example given by Rashi is a man accepts the chalitza will be done with a woman who is his yavama, but on condition that she pays him $200 afterwards. So does that work? What if she doesn't pay the $200? Is it a valid chalitza or is it not? Nun daled. Remez liyavama shasu b'chai ba'al minayin. How do we know from the Torah that a woman is not allowed to get married to her husband's brother? How do we know a woman cannot marry her husband's brother if the husband, who is now an ex-husband, is no longer married to her, meaning they're divorced? Amar Kra, if a man were to take the wife of his brother, she's a nida. But is she really a nida? She's not necessarily a nida. She might be at some point a nida, but not right now necessarily. So the Gemara explains, Elakinida, rather this situation is similar to that of a nida. Even though in the case of a nida, now she's forbidden, at other times she's permitted, and when she's permitted, she's totally permitted, and when she's forbidden, it's a kares penalty. So too, the marriage of a woman and her former husband's brother. It's permitted in some instances, namely when the husband dies childless, and there's a yibum marriage afterwards with the husband's brother. However, other than that scenario, in any other situation, chayav kares, it's a prohibition with the kares penalty associated with it. Everyone have a great week.